So I'm here with Josh for another episode of Cold Email Breakdown. And for anyone who has never watched this before, my name's George. I'm founder of Email Chaser, which is a cold email sending platform. And Josh, if you don't mind just giving a quick intro.
Hi, I'm Josh Michaels. I'm the founder of Three Red Boxes. We specialize in email outreach, working with niche industries to try to help them inbox, run systems, and turn conversions.
All right, so I was thinking that the first topic we can discuss today is email length. We had someone asking recently to review their email copy, and they're also asking about what is the ideal length for a cold email. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Uh, Short and sweet. I've learned that the average person no longer reads. I think the world of social media, and especially when it first started, that everything needed to be less than, what was it, 100 characters, I think, but 50 characters, 100 characters, something like that. Um, Honestly, I shoot for at the absolute most 100 words. If I can write the same email in 50, I'll do it. Every word in that email needs to have a purpose. I try to take out any fluff. I try to take out any explanations, like we talked about last week, educational type material. I'm literally just trying to get you to read it as simply as possible. I'm looking for 3, 4 sentences, short, sweet. I don't know if there's such a thing as too short. I have one client, we literally send 2 sentences and it's about 45 words and it works great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to agree with that. I I think one reason why a lot of beginners in cold email write really long emails is because they make the mistake of trying to tell the person absolutely everything about their business or product or service in that first email. And in my opinion, if you can keep that first email or first sequence or whatever before you receive the reply about one specific thing, it's the best way of allowing you to sort of reduce the copy. So, for example, if I was launching a campaign to sell Email Chaser, I'm not going to tell the person about every single feature Email Chaser has because that's going to be an entire essay. I would probably just focus on one specific feature we have, which I think has some kind of unique point to it, which they might be interested in. And the whole email is about that one thing. And that allows you then, as you say, get it down below 100 words, but even 50 words potentially, depending on the scenario.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, like you said, email chaser, if you have 5 things that you think make email chaser stand out, that's 5 different emails. It's not one email with 5 different topics. You take those 5 and run a sequence to people and start with what you think would land the most for them based on what you know about them, depending on their industry, their job, who they are. Maybe different people react to different features, different ways. If you have your lead finder, maybe that's for specific types of people versus, mailbox rotation that the average salesperson's not going to understand, but a consultant might understand. But yeah, keeping it short, sweet. All of us have gotten text messages. We've got emails where people wrote us a dissertation. And the first thing you do in your brain is like shut down. Like, I don't want to read all this. This is crazy. And do you actually read all of it, right? Do you skim over it? So it's a psychological thing, right? Just seeing paragraphs in long paragraph form on a long sheet and all this stuff written, people don't want to read it. People don't want to look at it and try to figure it out. They might skim the first sentence. It scares them away, right? This is not a marketing email. This is not an educational material. Somebody didn't ask for, hey, George, send me all of your API docs and how to set something up. It's like we've said, it's getting your foot in the door. Here's the one thing I can help you with in a concise, short, sweet way.
Yeah. And what you just said there, I had that exact experience probably only 1 or 2 days ago. I received this email and I just remember thinking when I saw the email, the first thing I thought was, I'm not even going to read this. I literally said to myself, I'm not going to read this. And it was pure psychology. It was the way it was. I just took a look at it now. I knew it was a sales, really as a sales, right? And I just decided not to find all these.
Yeah. I mean, the society now, especially with social media, especially with text messaging, nobody goes on phone calls anymore. I still call people. A lot of my friends get mad at me for calling them and not texting them. It's funny, but I'm old. All right. I'm of an older generation. And, when people send text messages, usually you're not sending paragraphs, right? You're writing it as short as possible. Half the time, you're not even using full words, because people don't want to read it. It's the same. Think about the same thing in email, right? If it doesn't need to be there, take it out. Short, sweet. People will read 25, 50, 75 words. If you stick 400 words on the page because you feel like that's what you need to explain your product, explain it in 50 words and give them a link that takes them to a page that explains the product. Or offer them a reply to help them walk them through the product, right? It just doesn't exist anymore. Nobody reads it. Social media has destroyed that. AI is making it worse. I watch colleagues that I used to work with. They would take emails. They would take my notes from a meeting, stick them into AI and tell it to summarize it so they knew what was going on. They weren't even taking meeting notes and actually reading them. So nobody does it. You have to stand out. You have to be short, simple, concise. Less is more. Most people, I see so many outreach emails, try to be a little bit different. There's nothing wrong with humor. There's nothing wrong with emotion. I see so many 1 sentence, 3 bullet points, 1 sentence, call to action. It's very, very standard, right? It's a good template to start with. I try to stay away from it because that's what everybody else uses. Like we've said before, there's so much noise in our mailboxes that when you see something you've seen before, you gloss over it. So find ways to stand out. I like humor in my emails. Maybe not the first one, second, third. I like trying to get emotion in my emails to try to stir up some emotion in what you're doing. I think it's important. But yeah, less is more. This is very much the case of less is more.
All right. Okay. I think we're back. That seems to have fixed it. Okay. All right. So last thing I'll say on that topic is that I think a lot of this comes down to pattern recognition. The human brain is sort of designed to recognize patterns. And if your email just looks like all the other thousands of emails that people are sending, people will just default ignore or not read it. So maybe, for people watching this, trying to think about what does an email look like that you send to your mother or to a work colleague or a friend, that's probably going to look very different to whatever the average cold email looks like. So try to not look like the average cold email and try to look like something that actually stands out, and you might actually get some replies.
And just try things, A/B test stuff. If you think longer works, write one longer one, run shorter one, do an A/B test and see what works better. Even if you have the shorter ones, try different ones, put humor in one, put more like pain points in one. You write different styles of writing in them. It's different for every industry, but it's definitely something to always test. But I think George and I will definitely agree. Pretty much shorter is always better. Under 100 words, if not under 75 words. Try and keep it that way. Like you said, it's all about psychology, what our brain sees, what we react to. I'm of the world where I used to get books in school, and when I had a huge book that somebody would hand me that was thousands of pages, I didn't even want to open it. It's the same kind of idea. Someone gave me a short, we would always see Cliff Notes for those of you that remember them, and it was a short, sweet, it was easy to open up the Cliff Notes and read it because it was 20 pages versus reading a 1,000-page book. It's the same concept.
An interesting A/B test, which might be fun to run, is just make an email so absurdly long that people actually are just intrigued by the fact that you send them a 600-word email. That might be something to test in the future, but I don't know how that's going to work. So another question that we got from our chat widget recently was on the topic of spintax. So basically the person was asking, is spintax necessary? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it is 100% necessary. The platforms and I know you guys were working on this, rewriting with AI, I think is really cool. I think one of the hard things with it is people who want more control over their specific content and don't trust the AI to not change the wrong thing. Spintax is the same concept, right? You cannot send the same templated email hundreds and thousands of times. You will get caught. Google, Office, Zoho, Yahoo, all of them will figure out that you're sending the same email over and over and over again. Even if you change first name, company name, the normal personalizations. You have to start thinking about changing at least 40 to 50% of your email every time and making different variations, right? I try to add at least 30 to 40% of my email in spintax. And it could be entire sentences. It could be one or two words, but I think it's absolutely important because it makes every email different, right? If you do the math and you add in 5 different areas, 4 or 5 areas that have spintax, and every one of those has 2 or 3 variations, if you start to exponentially think about how many emails that's changing, you're talking about thousands of variations at the end of the day. And it's just a way to stay out of the spam box. It's a way to not get caught by the spam police. You have to change the content that you're doing. If I send the same email to 1,000 people and 100 people click spam, now that template is now categorized as spam. So no matter where I send it to, where I send it from, even if it's a different mailbox, it's going to cross over to another mailbox. If you have a different domain, eventually it's going to cross over to another domain. They're recording it in their systems. One mailbox starts to go to spam because of it's the same content every time. It can get fingerprinted. It's kind of what they call it. And it will go back to all of the other mailboxes eventually on that domain. And if you're sending it from another domain, it'll start to also eventually start to go to spam for those other domains because it does cross over at some point. They figure out Josh is sending the same template from 15 different mailboxes, and they'll record all of it, and all of them will start going to spam eventually. So I definitely believe in spintax. I believe in changing as much as possible, even if, and your signature is the same thing. People don't think about spintax in signatures, right? You can change your name, right? You can change Josh Michaels. You can go from founder to owner to CEO. If you have an address in there, you can spell out the state or abbreviate the state. You can add your zip code, not add your zip code. So it's changing things to not, so if one template gets click spam too many times, it doesn't affect all the rest of them. So it's thinking about ways of changing as much as you can across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I always like to listen to what you say and then also try to break it down for anyone who's listening to us who's a complete beginner, because there's a difference between someone scaling a cold email campaign to hundreds of thousands of leads versus, I don't know, someone who's never sent a cold email before and they just want to launch their first campaign. I think for those people who've never even launched a campaign before, maybe things like spintax, especially if you're only contacting a few hundred people, it's not, that should not be something that kind of stops you. You should just try to launch a campaign, but as you're scaling volume, these kinds of things can help. And just on the topic quickly of email chaser, right now we have this AI rewriting feature, but in a couple of weeks we're going to remove that and we're going to replace it with this new feature called AI spintax, which will, as we just discussed, you'll basically be able to click one button and it will then automatically add spintax to the subject, the body, and the signature. And then the user will be able to also modify that if they want to. And the reason why we're doing that is because the AI rewriting feature that we currently have is interesting and it works to a certain degree, but it's a little bit too unpredictable. You can't really control OpenAI's LLM. Sometimes they'll rewrite the subject line in a way which doesn't really make any sense. So we're just going to replace that with the improved spintax version.
No, I'm definitely excited to try that. I think it's a much better concept. And like you said, George, for those that are just starting, like you said, if you're sending 100 a day, 100 a week, smaller sends, you definitely don't have to add spintax in. I mean, spintax is basically where you take the same word or sentence and you just say it in a different way. And you allow the platform to basically A/B pick between the two, right? So is it going to send the word founder? Is it going to send the word owner? Is it going to send the word CEO? And every time it picks a different one. And the more times you do that in the email, the more variations you have. And it just helps change it up. You can start very, very simply by just putting spintax on a couple words, right? And just start there and seeing how it goes and seeing how, if you like it or not. And then you can build up to more words, more sentences. I do think it's important, especially like you said, at scale. If you're just getting started by yourself and you're sending 10 a day, 100 a week, by no means do you have to use it, but once you start to see traction and you start to see the results that you want, you absolutely, it's one of those things that you need to start actually building into all of your sequences to make it work.
Yeah. On that topic of traction, of you launch a few campaigns, you see that one of them seems to be performing well, you're getting some replies. I think that's the point where most people want to start thinking about scaling. And then once you start thinking about scaling, that's when you start thinking about how can you do everything just at a much higher volume. And I was thinking of this strategy that I want to implement for Email Chaser, which people watching this can obviously do the same thing for their own businesses, where an idea is you can, for example, use a Chrome extension like our Lead Finder extension to extract all of the chief revenue officers or sales leaders of all the companies in the United States, and get their email addresses, double verify them, and then you contact all of those people once every 2 months. So instead of doing a traditional sequence of maybe 3 emails and that's it, it's just 1 email potentially in that sequence, and then every 2 months you just hit the same list, probably re-verifying the list every 2 months, just because there'll be some natural churn of that data where it's no longer accurate because people change job or whatever. But that's something which I think I'm probably going to try in the near future, which I think is an interesting idea. But do you have any strategies that you're working on right now on your side that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's industry dependent, right? I've worked with many HR companies that they want to email George to see if he's looking for a job today. Maybe he's not looking for a job today. Maybe he is in 3 months. Maybe he is in 6 months. Maybe he is in a year. Maybe he's in 2 years. And it's harder to sustain that, right? Because the more George doesn't open that email that I've emailed him, eventually it's going to start going to spam. Whether he clicks spam or not, if I email him 5-6 times over 6 months and he's not engaging with it at all, it's going to eventually start going to spam, whether it should or not, right? So it's a difficult concept. I've definitely worked with clients that want to email, basically they send to their list 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 during July. And then they want to take all the results from that, take out the people that converted, add in a few new people, but basically roll over the list once a month and then hit them 1 or 2 times in August. Roll over the list, hit them 1 or 2 times in September. It's possible. I think it's a more difficult infrastructure to sustain over time because you're emailing the same person over and over and over again. And they're basically telling you in one way or another that they're not interested, right? So how do you crack that nut eventually? Oh, maybe in a year from now, George will be looking for, a job or whoever it is, and it's difficult to time that. So that there's industries it works better for, there's industries that it doesn't. I do think there's something behind it, figuring out a way to, how do you roll over that list, right? Intelligently. How many times can you email them in 1 month? Do you take a month off here and there, right? I do think you need to start to segment that list as you go and put them in different categories, right? People who didn't open at all, maybe you slow them down after 3 months. People who open but didn't reply or click, maybe they stick with once a month. Maybe people that did reply or click but didn't follow up after that, you send twice a month. It's all about looking at the data that you're getting and using it as intelligently as you can, right? If you have someone who's not opened an email and you've sent them an email once a month for 6 months, maybe you let them go. Right? Maybe you send them an email. Hey, are you still interested in even hearing from us? You change up the style completely. Yes, no. If they're opening and not converting, change up the content. Now they're opening, but why aren't they clicking? Why aren't they replying? Change the content. For those that are clicking, are replying, but you're not closing, hit them with a different angle again. So it's, to me, as you go with that, it turns into more and more and more sequences and segmented sequences. It's not just take this 10,000 list, send it to them next month, send it to them next month, send it to them. It's clean it up, segment it as you go. It's a lot easier to control. Who's engaging, who's not engaging. And eventually the lesson that I learned from my mentor a long time ago, it took me a year to learn, you got to let go of some contacts eventually. Eventually you got to sunset them. You got to let them off your list. You got to let them go because they're just going to hurt your entire system. I tell those people, you're chasing that one lead for a year and you're burning the entire house down, and the 20 leads you could have had by instead of chasing that one, you would have had 20 instead of chasing that one lead for a year. And how many people did you have to consult with, talk to, deal with to rebuild your infrastructure, fix your infrastructure, all for that one deal? Right. So it's, I get it. I was in marketing. I never wanted to let go of a person ever. I wanted to email them 50 times a month. I wanted to force them to convert. It took me a long time to learn that concept. I still believe less is more. I do think there are ways to do what you're talking about. I just think you got to be really smart about it. Don't just take the same list and hit them month over month. Segment it, put them into different categories, put those categories into different styles of content based on what they've done.
Yeah, it sounds like the idea or the principle behind the strategy sounds simple, but the details are what matter. So yeah, okay, the general idea seems simple, but you really need to focus on those details. Re-verifying the list every time you reach out to it. Maybe even completely re-scraping the list potential. Once every 6 months or whatever. Careful the number of emails to send each time. Maybe keep it just to one, depending on. Yeah, all these little things matter, as you say. So for anyone watching who's thinking about doing this kind of thing, definitely try it, but just be careful on the details.
Yeah, it's very easy to burn the house down these days. I've seen people send campaigns and they've only hit email number 20 and they're already caught these spam issues. Right. And I've seen people send 200,000 before they have any spam issues. So it's a lot of little things. Like George was saying, for those of you that are just getting started, start small, cherry pick your leads the best that you can, go through your list, find the ones that you think are most likely to actually engage and be interested in what you're doing. If you have a list of 1,000 people, maybe one day you take a couple hours to manually go through it and you pick 200 and you start with them. Put the time and energy in up front because it'll pay off later as you go, right? Start with the best, see how it goes, see if if your emails work, see if outreach is working for you. But, yes, there are ways to roll that over, but it's a lot of little things every month, in the consent opted in email world, which is also getting a lot harder. The one thing we work on the most is segmenting lists, right? You can't send the same email to somebody who's not opened your email in 90 days to somebody who's clicked 5 emails in 90 days. You have to start building out these segments to be appropriate to what the person's doing. And it's the same thing in cold email.
Yeah. And also, for people watching, it's slight differences in how you build your lead list and who you contact can have really large differences in terms of the results you get. So we're building that lead list and you're targeting a specific type of person, like a CRO, you might get very different results compared to targeting a regular SDR or something. And yeah, that sounds obvious to anyone who's done this for a while, but these little differences, if they do make a difference, a big difference. And even with hiring, if you're trying to hire people and you're targeting, a regular software engineer versus a lead software engineer, that small change in job title, although it might seem relatively small, it's actually the quality of candidates you get are going to be dramatically different. And these kinds of things really just make a big difference. And also a cool thing you do in LinkedIn Sales Navigator is when they have their standard filters on the left sidebar, but they have a search bar as well, so you can add some keywords to the search bar, and that allows you to refine the list even further to be exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, I always start with whatever, if it's LinkedIn Navigator, some of the other lead acquisition tools. I concentrate more in the beginning to make sure that I'm hitting the right company and then finding the right person at that company. And I know it's a little bit harder in Sales Navigator because that's more based on people, but I concentrate more on the people that I'm finding, not looking at first that I find the right person, but first I'm looking at, is this actually the right company for me to be targeting? And then I go on to, is this the right person? It's a step that a lot of people skip. They think that because George is a founder of a company that, hey, he's a founder. I'm selling things to founders. He'd like to hear what I have to say, but maybe Email Chaser isn't the right fit for what I'm doing. So look at that part first. Look at the company the person's in, make sure that it fits your ICP, make sure that it fits your targeting, and then go back to who you're emailing and make sure that it's the right person. But it's a step that a lot of people skip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, there's tools out there like Clay and other things where you can use to basically look at a website and then identify if that website is a good match for what your offer is. I know you're building something along those lines right now, and there's a lot of different solutions out there, but that's something that is worth looking into for anyone watching this. You could potentially upload your list of leads or websites or whatever into some kind of tool like this, and then get to analyze all those websites with those leads, take out the ones which are just clearly not a good fit. If you're selling to hospitals and 20% of your lead lists are pharmacies, well, maybe that's not a great fit. And that's a common problem when you're extracting leads from a lot of these database tools like Sales Navigator or Apollo. You might put in the filters, but that doesn't mean that 100% of the leads that it gives you, it doesn't mean that all those leads are actually accurate based on the filters you put in. It's not always 100%. In fact, it's always 90%.
Yeah, I mean, I've been testing this a lot. I took 2 ICPs, one that I created on my own, just for my own case study, and one that's a client of mine. And we got unbelievably as narrow as we possibly could with it. And we pulled leads from Apollo. We pulled leads from Clay, and we started to sit there together on a screen share and actually go through the companies one by one, look at their domain, read their domain. Does it match what we're looking for? If you ever try that, you'd be surprised at how many don't match. It depends on the industry, it depends on the keywords, it depends on how good it can really match that information. But one of the things with those programs is that, like, if you look at companies, the company type, right? Let's say privately held, non-for-profit, that kind of thing. A lot of these databases don't have that information there. So if it's blank and you say, I want all the privately held companies, all the partnerships, all the LLCs, you're going to severely limit yourself just there, because 50% of their database could be blank and it could be a perfect fit. So some things, be a little careful about when you're targeting, maybe leave it more open and do some of your own filtering when you're done. Just be smarter with it. But yeah, I went through 400 leads with this client on this ICP. We went through about 200 domains one by one. And I'll be honest, about 50% actually matched. And we were very, very targeted in what we asked Apollo to give us, what we asked Clay to give us. It kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, where, as George was saying, I am working on building some automation, some software that will help people find leads and actually narrow them down to make sure you're emailing the right person. So it's going to be the entire process. At the end of the day, we're putting it out in different versions to make sure everything's working. But, the idea is that I want to make sure that the list you and I are working from to do outreach, we're hitting the right company and the right person. Because if that doesn't happen, if you don't do that kind of cleaning, no outreach system is going to run. No, you can write the best content in the world. If you're going to the spam folder, it doesn't matter, right? The systems these days, Google, Office, we talked about this before, they're recording everything. And if you're emailing, if 50% of your list is just the wrong company, how do you find the right person at the wrong company, right? It might be the CEO. It might be the VP of accounting. It might be the right job title, but it's the wrong company. Now, 50% of your list is probably either not going to engage, they're going to open it and delete it right away, or they're going to click spam, right? You're not going to get any kind of real positive signals from 50% of your list. So when you have a 30% open rate and you're like, why is it not 50% open rate? Well, 50% of your list is never going to open your email. If you get rid of them, your open rates go up, your reply rates go up, your ROI goes up, your conversion rates go up, everything goes up. And us people behind the scenes, the consultants behind the scenes, we love it because it makes it easier to actually sustain the system, right? Emailing 5,000 people who are the right people is a lot easier to maintain over time than if you have an extra 5,000 people that don't fit. Now the system starts to break. You start to go to spam. Nobody's happy. We're not getting conversions. Our open rates are dropping. It's not working. I'm frustrated. The client's frustrated. The revenue's not coming in. And those 5,000 people that might have actually engaged now aren't getting your emails because of the other 5,000. So just to me, 80% of outreach is your list. Take the time, take the energy, spend the money. People want to spend a little amount of money as possible putting their list together, a penny a lead or less, or 2 pennies a lead. Think about what you're selling. Think about the value proposition. If every deal you make is $200, maybe it's worth it to spend 5 cents instead of 1 cent per lead.
Yeah.
Instead of
I always find it hilarious when people don't want to spend, an extra cent when their value of product is $1,000 potentially.
right. And I get it. It adds up, right? If you have to buy leads for 15 cents a lead and you're buying 10,000, that's $1,500. That's a lot of money up front just to get 10,000 leads. A lot of people would be scared of that. Like, I can get the same thing for $100. Okay. But how many of them are actually right? How many of them could actually convert? How much are you hurting your system where you're going to have to hire a consultant, talk to George and his people, and try to fix the system that you broke and spend a lot more money doing an audit, diagnostic tests, shutting down the system to fix it, spinning up new things. All the money it takes to repair it is a lot more than if you just spent the money up front to get the right list. It's a lot cheap. At the end of the day, it's a lot cheaper. It doesn't seem like it day one, but down the road in 6 months, when you've paid 3 different consultants to try to fix your system, that's going to be a lot more expensive because most of them charge more than $1,500 a month.
It's like what they say about hiring people. There's nothing more expensive than hiring a cheap person. It's going to
exactly. It's always going to cost you more. I mean, I've had clients ask me because there's some niche, lead acquisition tools out there for very specific industries, right? That aren't Apollo. They're much, much smaller. They're very geared towards specific industries. And they'll say to me, Josh, is it worth it to spend 15 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents, 50 cents a lead? Well, let's buy 1,000 of them, test it. Let's get 1,000 of the old ones and see what happens. We'll run 2 different campaigns. Every single time it runs, not only does it convert better and run better, but it sustains itself better over time. You can keep going and your upkeep costs are a lot cheaper over time.
Yeah. Maybe
oil in your car. Change the oil in your car every 6,000 miles, right? Otherwise, it's going to cost you $50,000 to replace the entire engine. Versus the $100 to change the oil. It's the same concept.
Yeah, if I had to summarize everything you just said, I would probably say the least number of emails you can send to get the highest number of replies, that should always be the goal. And there's sort of small exceptions depending on how much you're trying to scale, but in general, the least number of emails for the highest number of replies, that's always going to be the goal. It's going to have the biggest impact on your deliverability long term. So that's a good thing to try to optimize for.
And before you scale, I mean, we kind of said this before and it ties into this, right? You send someone who's just starting or someone who's been doing it for a little while, you send 1,000 a month, 2,000 a month, and it starts to work. And you're like, damn, I sent 2,000 emails and I got 20 booked calls and it turned into two actual sales, 5 sales, whatever it was. And you're like, oh, I sent 2,000. If I send 4,000, all my numbers will double. Well, it doesn't really work that way, right? You have, returns that are not always, simple multiplication. It doesn't always work that way. So I usually tell my clients, let's take our time at this lower volume to dial in everything, right? It's easier to make changes at lower volume. It's easier to sustain. If you're sending 2,000 over month 1 and it worked well and you got, 50 replies and 5 meetings and 2 clients. Okay. Let's send those same 2,000 emails and let's try to get 70 replies and 15 meetings and 4 clients. So just keep improving what you're doing before your first notion is to just scale. Squeeze that lemon as much as you can to get all the juice out of it. And then once you have that, it's easier to scale because you know what works and what doesn't. And then you can slowly start to scale from 2,000 to 4,000 to 6,000, and slowly start to scale up. You will start to see a drop off at some point. It's not as simple as 2 + 2 = 4. Usually it equals like 3.5, and then it equals 3 2/4. It does fall off, but, really think about, if I can send 5,000 emails and drive the same revenue as 10,000 emails, wouldn't you always rather send 5,000?
100%. And that's also additional capacity that you have left over to contact new leads that you might want to potentially reach out to. So it's just a better strategy. On the topic of scaling and maximizing replies, if anyone watching this, if you've never done cold email before, you have all the time in the world, then you can sign up for an Email Chaser account and watch all the videos in Email Chaser University for free. Or you can go to Email Chaser's blog, read some of our articles. But for anyone who's watching this, who maybe already runs an existing business and is already generating revenue, and you just want to simply expand your your clients, but you don't have the time to actually learn all this stuff and spend hours launching and scaling campaigns and all the dealing with the deliverability issues that can happen if you don't know what you're doing. Someone like Josh is obviously the person to go with based on his experience. So Josh, you just want to close this out by maybe mentioning what your company specializes in and how they can contact you?
Yeah, so our company specializes in fully managed outreach. So we take over the system from you. We talk to you about strategy and all that stuff, but we basically take over the system. We also spend a lot of time just consulting with clients, people who have systems that are running that they think they can tweak and make a little bit better, or they're starting to have problems. We have packages that people can come in and you can have an hour of consulting, 3 hours of consulting, whatever it is. And we just come in, we sit down together over a couple meetings, and we go over your entire system from top down. And we start to develop better strategies for you to run and to improve things as you go. Check out 3redboxes.com. Talks about the different things that we do. We also do diagnostic audits on larger systems. So if you just want me to come in and just tear down the system and figure out what's wrong, for those of you who have issues going to spam or the junk folder, or you feel like your open rates have dropped or your reply rates have fallen off, we can talk about strategy, or you can just come in and we would do an actual top down complete diagnostic of your system and let you know what we found, tell you everything we found, tell you what we think needs fixing. And then, if you want, we could potentially help you fix it if that's what you want.
I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile in the description of this YouTube video. So anyone who wants to contact Josh, try to go to his website or connect with him on LinkedIn. And I think, that wraps it up for today. So, appreciate you joining today on this call, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, George.